And we're live.
Awesome.
All right. Hello, everybody. We went live a minute early. We're going to give people a chance to come in and be in the chat. So welcome. I'm Adrian. This is Polly Pocket of
Hi.
Instagram fame.
My name is Jahida, by the way.
Jahida, very
Yes.
nice to meet you.
Yes.
Very nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for being here. This is great.
Thank you.
Forgive me if I slurp in front of you. All right. So there's nobody in the chat yet. Obviously, we just went live. Just give them a few minutes. Thank you for being here. We're going to be talking polyamory today and a bunch of different aspects of it and whatnot. For those in the replay later, those who don't know, I'm writing a book. And in that book, one of the things that I plan to do is subvert the whole love triangle trope, which is really annoying, and turn it into a polyamorous relationship instead. We have our first person here. Bethany is in the chat. Hi, Bethany. How you doing? Bethany is awesome. She was on a live stream with me earlier.
Awesome.
A couple of weeks ago. All right. It seems like my countdown on Instagram is finishing up, so there should be some more people coming in soon. So I have with me today Jahida, the Poly Pocket, who is going to talk to us about polyamory. We're going to kind of cover a bunch of different aspects of it, all in the hopes to educate myself and others so that I don't disrespect the community with my book.
I love that.
Thank you. Thank you. So, all right. So we have here Bethany giving us some props already.
Yay.
All right. So, Bethany, you and anyone else coming into the chat are more than welcome to ask questions as we go. I'll throw them up on the screen as it is appropriate. First, I wanted to kind of get the lay of the land with you and see kind of where your whole polyamory journey started. I know that you're married. I know that from your Instagram, and recently you posted up a couple of images of I suppose, your polycule.
Yes.
So if you want to talk a little bit about how this all got started for you, how your marriage opened up. I don't personally know if you were already married when you started or before. So just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Yeah, I just recently did, I kind of laid out my polycule. And for those who don't know, a polycule pretty much is all of the people and connections that make up your relationship. So it starts with your primary relationship if you have a primary, because I know some people don't do the hierarchy, so they don't have a primary and all of their relationships are equal. But in my personal experience, I do have a primary, which is my husband. We have been together for 12 years, married for 9 out of those. So we were married before, we were married before opening up. We got married really young. So I was 20 years old and he was 21, and we had already had our first baby. So yeah, we've been together ever since. And I would say about 3 years ago, like 2.5 to 3 years ago, I kind of started feeling like monogamy just didn't make as much sense to me. It started making less and less sense as far as what I felt like I needed, and feeling like I just felt like one partner alone couldn't fulfill every single one of my needs. And same for me, like I felt a lot of pressure and feeling like I had to be this other half, this one person to provide needs for somebody else, when I know that I can't, do all of those things that he needed. So I brought it up first, and I do find that when I talk to other people who are also open or polyamorous, who are in like a hetero partnership, it's usually the woman that brings it up. So that's been my experience in talking to other people, but it seems to be the women bringing it up first. So I brought it up first, and I didn't just say, hey, do you want to be open? It was more like, what do you think about monogamy? Like, how do you feel about the way that, society kind of tells us to do relationships and marriage? And the conversation kind of started that way. And we just had on and off conversations about it for almost 2 years. And then one day we were at dinner and he was telling me about a conversation he had with a friend who had come out to him about being open and their experiences. And that day we just kind of clicked with it. And I had already been doing some reading about it and watching videos, kind of looking at other Instagram pages about polyamory as well. And in that moment, it just kind of clicked for us where we're like, you know, what do you think about just let's make a dating app profile together? And that's how it started. So that night we went home, we made a profile together, and it's been that way ever since. So we did start off trying to date other people together, and then we decided it would be better for us to date individually. So we have been dating individually ever since.
That's interesting. I was just going to say that you started out with the dating app together as a couple together. So at least back then, the idea was to bring in another person.
Right.
And then it just became like, well, each of you are poly on your own, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. We have Ginny and Bethany both in the chat. Hello, all. I think Bethany. Oh, yeah. So Bethany's already throwing out some questions at us. So is Ginny. I've got one coming up here. Before I get to that question, because it's a little further than we are right now, I'm going to get to it in a second, Bethany. So once you guys opened it up, did you run into any roadblocks within your primary relationship? Did it put any stresses on you, or did it actually flow kind of like what you expected it to?
It wasn't anything at all like what I expected, actually. I feel like once you're dating other people, and then you're starting a new relationship with somebody, you run into a lot of challenges. I feel like the biggest challenges were more so about things that I needed to address within myself. So I really got deep into learning about my love language, my attachment style. So I feel like those are my personal challenges, and things that I was not expecting. I think also another challenge is because I had been monogamous for so long, opening up at first, when you're starting other relationships, you tend to just go into it with the habits and other ways that, you were told to do a monogamous relationship, which some things don't work in a polyamorous relationship. So I kind of had to change the way that I approach starting new relationships and maintaining those.
That's fascinating, because I saw on your Instagram one particular post, or a series of posts, where you seem to be going through a little bit of heartache. It looked like maybe one of the relationships had just fallen apart or broken up or whatnot. And that's kind of fascinating to me, that you're in a primary relationship, a solid marriage that you seem perfectly happy in, and yet you can still be feeling heartbroken over a completely separate relationship.
Right.
That's really interesting how there's that sort of like compartmentalization, so to speak. Everything in its place.
Yes. Yeah. And that experience was new to me too, feeling like, oh shit, like I am going through a breakup and it feels the same as if going through a breakup from a monogamous relationship, and that I wasn't expecting.
Yeah, that's really cool. How odd to like go through such a situation like that. That's so interesting to me.
Right. The only difference with that is that I didn't have as much support from friends and family, obviously, because one other thing that I've encountered is that outside people who don't really understand tend to not validate those experiences as much as if I were going through a breakup from a monogamous relationship.
I'm sure that they can already be pretty judgy on its own, and then you're going through a little heartache, and they're probably going to be like, wah! Like I can already see it.
Like it doesn't matter. Yeah.
On the flip side, though, it's probably helpful in some aspect, I'm assuming, that you do have a primary relationship with your husband who can then provide love and support when you are going through such a thing, which you wouldn't have during a monogamous breakup.
Exactly. Yeah.
Very, very interesting. So I mentioned at the start of this that the the main reason why I've invited you onto this live stream today is because I am writing a book, and it is going to feature a polyamorous relationship of some kind in it. And so I'm sort of a part of this author tube thing, as we call it on YouTube. And so a lot of the questions that we're going to get today is probably going to be geared towards pop culture and fiction.
Okay.
Now, Bethany asks here, what are the cliches you hear about and hope fiction can stay away from? Which kind of like steers me into what I wanted to talk about, because I've watched a couple of TV. I know that there's at least 2 TV shows. One that I've watched called Trigonometry. I believe it's a BBC show, and one of my favorite movies actually is Professor Marsden and the Wonder Woman. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
I haven't.
So Professor Marsden was the gentleman who invented the lie detector.
Okay.
He also invented Wonder Woman and wrote her comics for many years. Wonder Woman, as it turns out, is based on his 2 wives. And so the movie follows him and his wife falling in love with this other woman and bringing her into the relationship. And they ended up having like 9 kids together or something crazy like that. And then after he died of cancer, his wives stayed married to each other for another like 40 years. Okay. So that dynamic is very interesting to me, fascinating and whatnot. But obviously the whole throuple thing is very common in pop culture. You usually don't see a lot of polyamory besides the throuple explored. So as per Bethany's question here, what are some of the cliches that you see in fiction and pop culture that you're hoping things will stay away from in the future, or whatever? What do you think about all that?
I'm not familiar with the show or the movie you were talking about, but I personally know the one thing that I was exposed to first that kind of showed somewhat of an open arrangement are like the reality shows about polygamy.
Right.
So sometimes when people hear polyamorous, they kind of associate that with this religious-based arrangement, which is
right, which is what most people know about Mormonism and whatnot, with the polygamy, and a lot of Indian and East Asian cultures will have this polygamy set up. Usually it surrounds one man and multiple wives.
Right.
But again, just as you said, that tends to be more of a religious structure to to those relationships. Very different from what you're talking about with polyamory.
Yes. Also, I've noticed a lot of those shows focus more on a husband with multiple wives, but there can also be arrangements with one woman with multiple husbands. So I also feel like that's not portrayed.
So it's more about being a little more inclusive with all the different types of setups, so to speak.
Right.
We have Ginny here chiming in that she was actually in a poly relationship for 7 years, and now she and her husband are in an open marriage. I remember Ginny getting very excited when I announced this particular live stream. I'm glad that she's here for it. She has another one here. So Bethany says, how is the social aspect with this? How would you see a fictional portrayal of this in an accurate way? You were mentioning, your social circle acting or behaving a certain way based on whether you're going through a breakup or whatnot. So talk a little bit about the social aspect of your lifestyle.
Well, I still have, a lot of my same friends, but I usually keep my circle small to begin with, but now we are finding that we kind of are looking more for friends who are also in similar arrangements. And then we've also, like, I know a couple weeks ago, I had my first polycule meet where one of my other partners and his primary and my primary and I got together. So we have social situations like that. I hope we have more. But usually in social settings, it's just my primary and I, and then our friends. But we haven't really included our other partners into that, mostly because our friends just aren't, I don't know, like, they're not really judgy, but they aren't as understanding of it. And and then like they aren't really friends with our other partners either. So we kind of just have different groups of friends, if that makes sense, that we don't all get together at the same time.
And what about family and loved ones who have been with you for a long time, who know that you've been married for a long time and now are exploring this new aspect to it? How have they sort of reacted?
We actually have not come out at all to our families. Yeah, so that's another bit of a challenge, because now we feel like we have to hide this part of ourselves. We just know, knowing our families, we know they definitely would probably not approve of it.
Sure.
So, you know, we talk about it every now and then, like maybe we should, you know, if we know this is going to be an ongoing thing, but right now it just doesn't feel like the right time. So it's kind of a shame that we can't include them in this lifestyle with us. I think if it ever got to the point where, you know, we had maybe a shared partner, we did find ourselves in a throuple or triad where it would turn into a situation where the person would be living with us and, you know, sharing all those things with us that my primary and I share. I think in that case, we would pretty much have to, you know, if they're going to be part of our lives 24/7.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. They would be more a part of your family at that point. So,
Right.
Yeah. Interesting. Bethany is asking, what is one common misconception that people have with this particular arrangement?
I think the main one is that they think it's just about sex, or they assume that we are swingers. I think the concept of actually being able to develop feelings for more than one person and have an actual romantic relationship, I think that's hard for people to wrap their heads around. So they assume that it's more of a sexual thing. And, you know, some people's arrangement are, but when we're talking polyamory, that means more, you're having more like serious relationships, multiple relationships at once.
Yeah. If you don't mind me asking, how many kids do you have?
2.
Me too. I have 2. And one of the reasons that I felt like I finally understood polyamory a little better was when I had my second kid, because it was this thing where before he was born, I was worried. I was genuinely worried as an inexperienced parent. I was genuinely worried that I would not love him as much as my first son. And I was worried that I would have to divide my love, so to speak, for them. And what I found was that I don't have a finite amount of love and affection that I had to then divide and split half and half.
Right.
My love grew. And, you know, like now I have 2 little guys who I love more than anything in the world.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And I can honestly look at each of them and say, I love you more than anything in the world. And I'm being completely honest with each of them. And that was one of the first times where I was like, oh, that's what these poly people are talking about.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah, it basically like made sense, because you just take it out of the family context and put it into the relationship context, and it all just kind of makes sense. Let me see here. My sister joined the chat. Oh, here's another Jenny message here. I found that a lot of people think we are actually cheating on our primary when they know about it, and so not cheating. Yeah. Yes. You know, I found in my research, you know, I've been reading sort of the polyamory Bible.
I don't know if I should reference anything from it.
No, of course. I haven't finished it, but I've read quite a bit of it. And you know, one of the things that I'm finding is that polyamory as a concept seems to be more about equality and fairness than anything else. It's more about giving each partner in the relationship equal say and equal rights in everything, which is completely opposite from what people assume that it is, which is right. They assume it's cheating, or they assume it's just, you know, rampant sex or whatever it is. And it's literally the opposite of that. That's fascinating to me. Let's see what else we got going on here. Do you think a lot of people struggle to come out to their families? Have there been families that have been receptive? I know I've seen some poly families on Instagram that seem very receptive. I also know polyamorous folks in my own life who, like yourself, keep it from their family because, well, let's face it, we're in the deep South over here. So some folks are just not open to that sort of thing. Is that, your experience, obviously, with your own family, having to keep it from them? It's got to be something along those lines.
Yeah, I definitely agree that a lot of people do struggle. But like you said, I have seen like a lot of the pages that I follow on Instagram, it seems like their families are pretty much on board. So yeah, I think there's a little bit of everything. Some people do struggle, other people don't. I mean, like I guess backtracking to our question about families before, like the only person in my family that does know is my younger sister. But besides that, like my husband's family doesn't know, the rest of my family doesn't know. That's just the one person I'm really close with and that I knew would not, one, say anything to anybody else, and two, would not judge. And so maybe that was a start for us, you know, and maybe even when we do decide, she can kind of be there for support in helping us to come out. But yeah, I think I see a little bit of both. I see a little bit of people struggling while others are very open about it.
Oh, Bethany wants to know what book this is. Okay, Bethany, this is The Ethical Slut. It is written by Janet W. Hardy and Dossie Easton. I don't know if you can see that on here. I'm bad with cameras. There we go. Very, very interesting read. Obviously all about polyamory and all its different facets. So if you are at all interested, this is a great book. Pick it up, check it out. It's good stuff. As you can see, we both have a copy, so this book gets around. That's interesting that your sister knows, because it's kind of like cracking the door open, kind of peeking out a little bit and testing the waters, so to speak.
Yes.
So that's cool. On that same subject of family, Ginny mentions that her family actually does know. She's not shy about it, but also doesn't go yelling it from the rafters. All right, let's see. My sister has a question that she's worried we've asked already. What's the question, sis? This is my sister.
Oh, hi.
Let's see here. All right, here we go. And it's a book. How did you learn you were polyamorous or open to it? Did you always know, or did you fall for more than one person and feel conflicted until you knew what it was? I know that we started talking about it before there was too many people in the chat. You did cover a little bit about this, but if you want to, recover it a little bit for the latecomers.
Yeah. So looking back now, I feel like I always knew, to be honest. And I can remember a time when I was in high school. That was also the first time that I realized that I was bisexual. So I had like a little bit of a 2-for-1, like realizing that I was polyamorous and bisexual at the same time. So I had a friend, a female friend, and I remember talking to her on the phone, and we were expressing our feelings for each other, and I had a boyfriend at the time. So I remember telling her like how much I really liked her, but I have a boyfriend, so we can't pursue anything. But then feeling super conflicted because I had these feelings for my boyfriend, but then I also had feelings for this friend. But at the time, I was so young, I didn't even know, like, the word polyamory was not in my vocabulary. I had no idea what it was. So it was then much later on, like I was telling earlier, in my marriage, where we kind of started talking about our beliefs around monogamy, and we kind of started evolving in that way until I brought it up to maybe try to be open. And then when we both were ready and we both kind of clicked on it, we're on the same page, then we decided to officially open up.
And if my math is correct, you guys had been married for about 7 years when you started exploring this. Is that right?
Yes. So it was around the time my second child was born, like right after, like I would say a year after. So yeah, we would have been married for about 7 years.
Yeah, by then you probably have a pretty, solid foundation to the marriage that you can even broach that topic. I'm sure that a lot of people would be afraid to even bring it up with their spouse. This fear of how they might react, or
Right.
if they'll take it the wrong way, if they'll take it as if you're saying you don't love them as much anymore, when it's really not about that at all.
Right.
Did that fear come into it at all with you?
Oh yeah. Like I wanted to bring it up much sooner actually, but I kind of was conflicted for a while, wondering, if I bring it up, is he going to think that I don't love him anymore, or that I am not happy anymore? And then I almost questioned my own thoughts as well. I'm like, is the reason why I'm wanting to have this conversation because I'm not happy? So I had a lot of like reevaluating to do, and I had a little bit of a long period of time where I was kind of conflicted as to what I should do. And then eventually I just couldn't, I didn't want to live like that anymore, questioning myself and being conflicted. So that's kind of why my approach was more to ask the question, like, what do you think about monogamy and the way that society tells us that we should do it? So it kind of started there and opened up every time that we talked about it.
Right. Rather than kind of put the whole idea out on Front Street, more creating a dialogue with him.
Right.
Getting him to express his feelings on it first.
Right.
Smart. All right. So Bethany has got to go pick up someone from the airport. All right. If you're still listening while you're driving, drive safe. Don't go off the road or something. Airport pickups are the worst.
I never volunteer for that.
Oh, man. Okay. So in the case of the book that I'm writing, I feel a little remiss to point out that it is actually a throuple that I'm sort of building in the book. But what was interesting to me was that one of the characters, this character named Faye, has been sort of living in my brain for a couple of years. And it's only recently that I finally started putting her to paper. The other two characters are much newer. One that was supposed to be the protagonist of this particular novel, and another one that's a supporting character. And I found that their personalities sort of fed into each other, so to speak. Each one of them sort of completes the other one in a particular way. And that's where it sort of started for me, was this idea of these three characters, for some reason, just kind of fit together like puzzle pieces. It would be disingenuous of me to pair up two of them or none of them. They sort of belong together. So I wonder if that comes into it at all with your polycule, if it's a matter of looking for things in a person that your other partner doesn't necessarily fulfill, so as to sort of fill in gaps. Or is it, are they independent of each other completely? Do they have nothing to do with each other in that sense? What's that like for you?
I think a lot of times it just kind of naturally ends up happening that way, where the other partners do kind of fill in some of those gaps. And like I was mentioning before, with, in a monogamous relationship, sometimes there's that pressure to be your person's everything, or for them to be your everything. But with having those other people to fill in those gaps per se, it takes that pressure away. And one example that we have is, so my husband's really into, comics and like the superhero movies and all like the nerdy stuff. And I'm not so much. So like he basically tries to drag me out to see these movies and I don't want to. So I get really excited when he finds somebody who will do those things for him, with him. And it's nice because then he gets to have that time with somebody who's genuinely interested, that he doesn't have to drag out. And then I don't have to feel pressured to have to do those things because I know he already has somebody that he can do those things with. So it's kind of nice in that way. And then right now, one of my other arrangements kind of fulfills a lot of my power dynamic desires and BDSM. So that has been working out really well.
Right on. Yeah, so that is kind of what I was seeing with my characters. It's you know, in writing you have what we call plotters and we have pantsers, right? You have the plotters who plan everything out for their novel. They know everything about everything before they even start writing. And then you have the pantsers who just sit down and write by the seat of their pants and see where it goes. And then the in-betweeners like myself that plot a certain amount, but also allow wiggle room for discovery as we're writing. And it sounds almost crazy in a way to say it, but the characters that sort of live in our heads, you know, you're forming fully formed characters and they're going to kind of tell you what they want, you know. And there's times where I want a character to make a particular decision because it's good for the plot, but that character is not the person to make that decision. They refuse to. Like, no matter how many times I write it, I'm like, it's not right. And I have to go back and change it and let them sort of dictate where I have to go. And I'll even end up rewriting my outline, you know, because my character decided that the story is something else. And I'm like, it's kind of frustrating. Mm-hmm. But that's sort of where all this started for me. Like I said, was this sort of desire that the characters had themselves of sort of fitting together despite what my plans were for them. So that's fascinating that it's so true to life that way. You know?
Right. And I love that. I love your creative process. I'm always really fascinated by how people create things because I have a particular creative process, and I love hearing other people's stories and how they, you know, kind of birth their whatever it is that they're creating.
Yeah, that's part of like my aim with this channel and my author platform in general, because there's so many authors on YouTube who are posting videos of how to do this, how to do that. And I'm no expert in anything. I don't really want to sit there and tell people how to do their particular project. I'd rather tell them how I'm doing mine, you know, because everybody, as you say, has their own creative process. And it's like, well, this is what I do. You know, this is how I'm writing my story. And, you know, you can learn from it what you want to take away from it. In case you haven't seen it yet on the screen, my sister is really fond of your glasses for some reason.
Thank
you. Interesting. So where do you, hold on. We got another one here. It's like puzzle pieces for relationships. Each person brings something different to the table, but as a whole, make a complete experience. Well said.
Yeah, I agree.
Well said. So, you mentioned earlier that if it occurs that you and your husband bring a third person or something like that, and it becomes part of your daily life, and they're living with you, and then you might, you know, extend your coming out to your family. Where, if anywhere, do you see this going? Do you think that the arrangement you have right now is probably how you'll continue with each of you separately dating? Or are you ultimately looking for sort of a closed polyamorous relationship? Do you have aspirations for the future of this relationship?
We don't really have a set outcome in mind right now, or like a goal. We just kind of went into it really openly, and we are just open to it flowing however it wants to. So right now, I think it's working really well for us to be in what's called like a V arrangement. So like, you know, I'm here and then I have him and another partner. So that's where the V comes in. And then same with him. But we have, you know, recently talked about exploring with other couples or a third, but not for the purpose of getting into a closed triad or quad or any type of arrangement that's like more permanent.
Right. Right on. So what about the kids and the family and all that? Like, do they know that mommy's going out on a date and they're staying home with dad? Is that not something that is
They
broached with
don't.
them at all?
I think right now they're a little bit too young to even understand. So we don't share that. However, I do plan on, sharing that as they get older, and because we really value transparency in our home, and we want them to feel like they can come to us and trust us, and we always want to be open and transparent with them.
Nice. Very cool. Now, is there any, I know that you mentioned that you hadn't seen the shows or the movie that I mentioned prior, but is there anything in pop culture or fiction in general that I know you mentioned the reality shows, but anything scripted, so to speak, like that you've grown attached to, that you've seen and identified with, or that has been completely wrong? There's that too. Any of
I
that?
guess not necessarily anything that ends up being a poly relationship, but I do have a lot of experiences where I'm like, I wish it would, because it would fit so well. One example is, I don't know if you're familiar with that show, Jane the Virgin.
I've seen some episodes. My wife used to really be
it's
into it.
kind
She
of
watched the
funny,
whole thing.
but there's this like really complicated love triangle, and you can tell that she really does love them both. And there's such a struggle, but she always feels like she has to pick one or the other. And there's parts where she's almost like she's happy with this person, but part of her is still suffering because she's not with this other person. Like it's throughout the entire show, and it's supposed to be like a funny show, but there are some more serious moments where I think I just remember watching it and just being like, oh, just be with both, it would work so well.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of those moments where, in TV and movies where I just wish they would write it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, because it sounds like the character ends up having to deny aspects of themselves to choose one or the other rather than embrace both.
Right. And then
themselves.
both of the characters that she's picking, from are so different. So they both kind of bring in different aspects and characteristics to her life, but she's always having to deny one.
Yeah, and I've seen that plenty as well. That's part of the goal with mine, is that there's that trope of the love triangle, and you see it all the time, whether it's ridiculous like Twilight, or actually well done like that one, where you're just, like you said, sort of rooting for them to just get their head out of their ass and just get to do both. Like, it seems like you're happy with both. Why are you having to deny yourself one or the other? Let me see here. It's Jeannie is saying she always wants the love triangles to be poly. It would make things so much easier on all of them.
It really would. It's like I just wish they would have this aha moment and just realize how much easier it would be.
Yeah. Yeah. The BBC show that I mentioned earlier, it's a show called Trigonometry. And again, it's another throuple situation, but I found it to be really honest and sort of raw, so to speak. It covers this husband and wife who, money's tight and they're having to rent out a room. And so the person that ends up moving in is this woman who she was like a championship swimmer. She was like an Olympic swimmer, and she had a horrible accident. She like broke her back or something terrible happened, and she couldn't be what she wanted to be anymore. And now she's also, sort of finding herself again. And so she moves in, and it creates this sort of turmoil in the marriage, because the wife becomes very attracted to her, the husband becomes really attracted to her, and it's creating these really difficult situations for everybody. And like 4 or 5 episodes in, they're like, wait a minute, why don't we just try? And everything starts to come together. And I love it because so far it's only been 1 season. I don't know if it's going to be renewed or not. But by the end of that first season, they're having to come out to their friends. They're having to come out to family and really explore it a little deeper. They didn't even know what polyamory was, much like yourself in high school, when you didn't even know what the word was. And yet you were struggling with it, you know?
Right.
So that's something that I really hope that I see more of in fiction and pop culture, is this sort of awareness that this even exists and is an option,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Sort of this awareness that people don't have about it. And it's funny because the episode where they start coming out to their friends, they have this sort of montage where they invite a bunch of friends over and sort of sit them all down and tell them all. And they're so happy to tell their friends. They're so happy to come out and to finally like stop hiding and all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And as their friends are leaving, they're like, why did they have to like sit us down and tell us, like, who cares who's sleeping with who? And like, you know, it's like they didn't even realize that their friends were open-minded enough to like not even care. You know what I mean? And that's almost the goal, is to like have people not even care.
Right, to surround yourself with people who are just going to be, you know, open to it, where it's not going to be such a big deal.
Yeah, they're like, yeah, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
do whatever you want. We are at about 40 minutes. We have 20 minutes left in the live stream. I want to throw it to you. Is there anything in particular that you wanted to cover, that you know, anything that we haven't asked, that anybody in the chat hasn't asked, something that you wanted to make sure got out there, so to speak?
Yeah. Well, you had asked me before about what it is that I would like to see in poly relationships in a fictional setting, such as your novel. It took a little bit for me to come up with an answer, but I really think what I would like to see is the real life challenges. So things like scheduling, that's a big challenge, you know, right away. And it's a challenge that you kind of deal with the entire time, and you just learn to manage your time better. Also issues like jealousy. I would like to see conversations and like a dialogue around creating boundaries. So, you know, maybe have like all the characters talking about things they're comfortable with or they're not comfortable with within their relationship, or within, you know, their individual relationships, and not just the whole throuple. So I really would like to see the real life challenges, because I think sometimes, you know, people think that it's easier to do an open relationship or a polyamorous relationship. I think they think it's easier than a monogamous arrangement, but it isn't always true. Like, there has to be so much more communication, because now you have more people involved, 3 separate lives involved. So I think I would like to see dialogue and communication about that kind of stuff.
I remember seeing a couple of memes from the poly community of scheduling in particular, where they'll have like a graph and there's like lines going everywhere, and you know, everybody's trying to get like their time slots in, and oh, this person is sick, so let's move this over, and like, you know,
oh yeah,
it's got to be really interesting to like manage your time with all that, not just with the relationships, but being a parent as well.
Yes.
Kids taking up so much of your time and energy, and not that we complain, I love it, but that's got to be really a really interesting challenge to schedule everything around. Right on. Well, that's really cool. I'm definitely, I already had in the novel a scene where they're going to, I haven't written it yet, but it's planned for, where they will have to sit down and hash it out. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like, look, this is what's going on. Like, let's talk about it. Let's talk about our boundaries. And like you said, and that's going to be really interesting, you know, to put that out there, to have these 3 characters sort of sit down and really discuss it. Ginny says she agrees it's not easier. The transparency and communication is a big key.
Yeah.
You know, part of what really like fascinated me with polyamory in general was when I found out about the flag and the meaning of the colors on that flag, where one means openness and honesty, the other one is love and passion, and the other one is trust and solidarity. I find it interesting that each one has 2 aspects to it. not just one, and that each of those aspects goes hand in hand with the other one. You can't have openness without honesty.
Right.
You can't have passion without love. You know, you can't have trust without solidarity or back and forth. My novel is actually one of a trilogy. It's the first in a trilogy. And so part of my plan is to have the themes for each book reflect that flag. So the first one being openness and honesty, having the second one be love and passion, and having the third one be trust and solidarity. Take them through this sort of journey to solidify the relationship, so to speak.
Okay.
So I found that really fascinating because it has this sort of, well, polyamory is often referred to as ethical non-monogamy.
Mm-hmm.
And so the ethical part is what's really interesting to me. This whole idea of everybody being fair and everybody being equal. Like I said before, this sort of, balance to everything.
Yeah.
And I don't know about anybody else, but in my own life, I found that most things come down to balance, comes down to just finding a balance in whatever the issue at hand is. So, so when you say that, it just rings very true to me, to talk about all those individual things, the scheduling, the bouts of jealousy or whatever happens to come up in it, and finding that balance within each other and with each other in the relationships. All right. So the chat is slowing down a little bit. It looks like most folks have asked the questions that they wanted to, as far as I can tell. I want to take a second, let everybody know that if you want to find Miss Jahaira here, you can find her at Instagram at the Poly Pocket. Also, if anyone is watching this on the replay, you're new to my channel, I was hoping to reach out to a lot of new people on this one. You can find me at booksbyadrian.com. The address is down there at the bottom. I've also got a Patreon, which is there as well. If you are coming at us from Instagram, we both have the video linked in our link tree, and as well as our other pages. So feel free to go over there. If you are watching this on the replay and you weren't able to be with us in the chat, you weren't able to ask your question, you can find us both on Instagram and send your questions if you want to. I don't want to speak for you, but I'm assuming that would be okay with you.
Yeah, I'm always open for questions. I also like to do a lot of interactive posts, usually on my stories, where people can submit questions. So I do that a lot. So you'll have an opportunity to submit questions.
I remember in your stories you mentioned that you have a podcast coming up soon. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So I wanted to create a podcast where I could talk a little bit more, go more in depth. A lot of my captions get to be a little bit long when I really get into them, and I don't know if people really take the time to read them. So I thought it would be a little bit easier to, do something where I could talk about it and take a little bit more time to really go into some of the details, and also another opportunity for people to ask me questions and share some of their stories. So I'm actually launching my first episode next week on Thursday, so the 15th.
Nice.
And that I have that linked in my Instagram already, so that you can check it out. So I have a link tree in my bio, and it'll say podcast.
All right. For those looking for it, her Instagram, you'll find in her stories all this mention of the podcast. I'm sure it'll be linked on your link tree once it does go live. So it'll be on there for everybody to check out. Now, the other big aspect on your Instagram, besides the poly relationships you've mentioned before, is the BDSM.
Yeah.
Now, I take it that that's, from what you told me earlier, that's something that your husband doesn't necessarily participate in, as far as I can tell.
Right.
So that's something fulfilled by a separate relationship in that.
Yes.
Okay. Was there anything you wanted to throw out about that? Because that's something that I am completely uneducated in. I don't know much about BDSM at all.
I guess one big misconception is that I don't know if maybe it's just the people that I've talked to about it. I feel like once you mention BDSM or kink, they kind of envision like, you know, the full body latex suit type of thing, and they
Yeah,
automatically
the gimp with the
get it.
mask, with the zipper.
Yes, yes. But it's not like that at all, at least in my case. I mean, for some people, obviously, who have fetishes, that's, you know, that is their experience. But for me, it has not been that way. So I end up having to clarify that a lot. And really, this is a little bit of a newer aspect of myself that I'm still exploring. I ended up with a partner who it just kind of naturally gravitated toward that. So similar to how poly relationships can kind of gravitate into a throuple, like in your story, I have, you know, been seeing this person and we've naturally kind of gotten into this DS dynamic, dom sub dynamic. And that's just kind of like the energies that we both bring to the relationship.
Right on. And I'm assuming that there's a lot of safety concerns with all that. You probably have to talk all that stuff out beforehand.
Yes.
Safety words and all that.
So just like, you know, with the polyamorous relationship, transparency and communication is key, especially when you're engaging in some things that could, you know, cause harm. So that's definitely a conversation. I mean, and we constantly revisit that conversation too.
Yeah.
We do what I call like the yes, no's, and maybes. So like I'm constantly evaluating what my hard yeses are that I am okay with, what my hard no's are that I'm definitely not okay with, and the maybes that we kind of revisit every once in a while to see if that will go into the no category or the yes category. Nice. So yeah, communication is really important.
Right on. I train in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and there's a lot of chokes. There's a lot of arm bars, stuff that can make your elbow go that way. So, you know, you got to be really careful. You have to communicate with each other because you're training. You're not fighting each other. You don't actually want to hurt each other in these situations, but you want to take it just to the edge. Yeah. Because you have to know how to actually do it if, God forbid, you were ever in an actually dangerous situation, rather, where you have to defend yourself. So it's funny that that's where my mind goes, but when you're talking about BDSM, my mind goes to jiu-jitsu and how like we have to tap, you know, like right before you go unconscious and whatnot.
That would almost be equivalent to a safe word.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny because the idea behind the safe word is that it has to be something that you wouldn't normally say in this situation so that you don't accidentally say it. Whereas, you know, if you're wrestling with each other, I could very well like accidentally seem to tap when I'm not actually tapping. Okay. So you do have to actually like let them know. You know, if you tap on the mat, nobody's going to know that you're tapping on the mat. Nobody's going to respect you. Like you have to. And if you can't, if both of your hands are tied up because they have you in a hold, like you're going to have to actually say the word tap, you know, like you have to, you have to verbalize it. You have to be very clear because again, you could get choked unconscious. You could have a, you know, a broken limb or whatever if you're not being safe. I put out a request for any other questions. It looks like everybody's doing pretty good. Looking forward to the rewatch to catch what she missed. I think we caught you up, Johnny. Once you finally showed up, I don't think there's too much you missed. But yes, please watch the replay. I was expressing to Jahida earlier that the replay is available right away. The link that we posted to this live stream will always be good for the replay. The live chat will show up tomorrow. It usually takes about 24 hours for the live chat to catch up. So thankfully, I think I've caught up with the live chat and kept it coming up on the screen for the most part. So even on the rewatch, most people should see everything. So we are at 55 minutes. Jahida, did you have any like parting words, any plugs that you wanted to throw in there? Make sure that people can find you anywhere or whatnot. I'll put your
right now the only place where I post about my poly experiences are on Instagram. So yeah, and I update it very frequently. So that's where you can find me.
Right on. Right on. And do you know yet where the podcast will be available? Is it just going to be on Spotify, iTunes, all of the above?
Yeah, I'm hoping to get it out to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, stuff like that. But for now, it's going to be on Red Circle.
Okay.
So redcircle.com/shows/polys-dollhouse. So
Okay.
again, that's linked on my link tree.
Gotcha. I will throw out to you. There's a website called Anchor, like the anchor on a boat, Anchor.
Yes.
And they, if you publish your podcast on them, they themselves send it out to everybody else. So
Okay.
iTunes gets it, Spotify gets it. I think it's even on Pandora. Like it's everywhere. So
Okay.
that would be a one-stop shop. I don't know if the website that you're using provides that service or not, but if you are looking to get on as many as possible, you might want to look into Anchor. It might be a good help for you.
Okay, well, thank you. I'll look that up.
Absolutely. Okay, so thank you so very much for joining me today. This has been a lot of fun, has been very interesting, very educational.
Yeah.
I hope that you stay in touch. If you ever want to come back on, if you want to talk about anything and everything, just please let me know. You're more than welcome anytime. I do live stream Sundays every Sunday, and I'm trying to fit in like writing sprints and other stuff like that throughout the week. But live stream Sunday will be almost exclusively for having a guest on and covering a particular topic. So today was Polly. If there's anything else, once your podcast comes on, if you want to hype it up or whatnot, please just let me know. You're always welcome on the channel.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you guys in the chat. Thank you for showing up and asking your questions. That was a big help and led to some good conversation. Ginny is thanking you once again. I think she's your biggest fan right now.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thanks for your questions.
All right. Well, thank you guys, everybody, for being here. I'm going to go ahead and close out the stream. This was great, and we'll catch you all next time on Books by Adrian.
Bye.